My Mother, The Person and the Patient is an original podcast written and hosted by me, Fortuna Kuso. This podcast is about my mother, Timiro Abdussamid Mohammed, Ayaya we call her, and that's the Somali word for grandmother, and her great-grandchildren call her Ayaya too, and that is their way of saying great-grandmother. As a caregiver to my mother, I took several steps to ensure her safety. Hospital bed, mechanical lift, a wheelchair, a commode, remodeling the bathroom, and making it accessible for her, both when she was still mobile and even now that she's not mobile. I planned all that. But one thing I haven't thought about was my safety as I'm moving my mother in and out. It didn't really occur to me I needed to make sure I am safe in the process of caregiving to my mother, especially now that she is 100% physically dependent on somebody else to move her. I am using the mechanical lift to lift her from her bed into the commode for the shower, off the commode back onto the bed to dress her, off the bed onto the wheelchair so she could go to the kitchen, go to the living room. However, my mother now, she's at a place where she cannot turn to her side at night when she sleeps. She stays in whichever side I put her down to, that's what she stays. So what I do is if she goes to bed around 7 or 8, I would wake up or stay awake until midnight and I would turn her to her other side. So one side didn't really get bed sores. So in that turning of my mother and adjusting her onto the wheelchair, if she wasn't sitting right, adjusting her into the commode, that's something I do physically myself because the lift cannot help me with. But if my son is here, he would come up and help me turn my mother to her side. But when I am all by myself at night, midnight, 11:30, when I'm turning her to her side, I don't watch for myself to make sure I am doing safe. So about 2-3 nights ago, I was turning my mother and somehow or another, the dress I was wearing caught under her. And then when I turned her, her entire weight was on the flap of my dress that went under her. And it pinned me down under her. And it's not like I can tell her to turn away so I can get out. And my hands are holding her. So I'm caught in this place. If I let go and try to get that dress off around my neck, then I'm afraid she's gonna fall because she's not fully on her side yet. And I couldn't move. I couldn't do anything. It was like I couldn't breathe anymore. So, and I'm trying to call for my son, but I had to call for him 3, 4, 5 times because he is in the lower level of the house. My mother and I are in the upper level. So he heard me and he came running and he held her while I took my dress and freed myself out from under her. And that experience told me I can't really go into helping my mother in the way I was before. So from that day on, I'm being careful when I am turning my mother, making sure that I have short sleeves, something that's not going to get caught. I'm not wearing a scarf around my head and keep my safety in mind. Because if I'm not safe, my mother is not safe. My safety is very important, not only for me, but it's important for her own safety. My well-being, my health is not only important for me, but important for her too. As long as I am healthy and safe, she will be safe too, because I am taking care of her. But if I compromise my safety and I get hurt and I can't take care of her, not only am I going to be in trouble and in pain, she is going to be in trouble too. So I'm reminding myself it's very important that I'm safe and taken care of so I can take care of my mother. I am careful every time I approach my mother since that day, making sure I am coming from a place of safety, and that has made all the difference. When you listen to how we arrived at my mother's diagnosis and what followed, it's so easy to see her just as the patient, to see her as nothing more than the disease that reduced her to shell of her old self. But I want also to tell you about my mother, the person, the fierce woman that told her stories unapologetically, celebrating the beautiful parts and harsh realities equally. I want to share with you the stories she told us about her life as a girl growing up in a small village, the tales that marked her adulthood. I want to share with you all her losses and the ultimate winnings. The following chapter is one of those stories, reconstructed from my childhood memory. The night air settled heavily around the small house, casting elongated shadows on the walls. Timiro sat on the chair, her mind tangled in the thorny underbrush of her thoughts. The flickering glow of a single lantern cast a warm, amber hue across the room, the only source of light amidst the darkness. The sound of crickets outside filled the silence, their rhythmic chirping punctuating the heavy atmosphere. 4 hours had slipped by like the setting sun's shadows, whispering their secrets to the night. Timiro's gaze remained fixed on the entrance, her heart hammering in anticipation of her husband's return. When the familiar silhouette finally materialized in the doorway, she couldn't help the surge of mixed emotions that flooded her being. She wanted to rush to her husband and tell him all she had learned, the disturbing gossip about her tribe, but she couldn't tell him she wouldn't. "Are you still awake?" Her husband's voice broke the silence, carrying a weary undertone, as though the world's weight lay heavily on his shoulders. Timiro's eyes flitted up to meet his, searching for any sign of suspicion. She found none. She couldn't discern whether he'd asked a question or that was a statement for a moment. She quickly composed herself, the carefully constructed mask of composure slipping seamlessly back into place. "I wasn't tired, Mohammed, so I thought I would wait for you," she replied softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Mohammed stepped closer, his broad shoulders surrounding her with comfort that always came with his presence. Timiro could see the day's dust still clinging to his worn uniform, evidence of the hard work during the patrol. As he settled on the seat beside her, Timiro forced a gentle smile, masking the turmoil swirling within her. "How were your chores?" A knot tightened in Timiro's chest, but she maintained her facade, nodding subtly. "It was easy. I had the school and reorganizing the firewood," she replied. That was true. Unlike the following day where she was scheduled the communal shower and the mess hall. But she didn't tell him that. The flickering lantern light cast fleeting shadows across Mohammed's face, emphasizing the broad smile on his face. She could read the relief written all over him. Timiro's heart clenched at the sight, her resolve wavering briefly. She knew she had to tread carefully, for the delicate balance of their lives within the base depended on it. "I'm glad you had an easy day," Mohammed said, a flicker of relief passing through his tired eyes. "I hope Layla continues to divide the chores fairly. We need the support of the community here. Unity is crucial for our survival." Timiro nodded, her heart heavy with the weight of the unspoken truth. "She will treat me fair from now on." She understood the implication. the fragility of her position in this foreign place. She had no intention to lie to her husband, but what else could she do? I'm sure of it, she added. Timiro forced the words as the image of Layla's disdainful gaze lingered in the recesses of her mind, fueling the fire of determination within her. I'm glad of it, Mohammed said. The silence that followed pressed against Timiro's chest, each passing moment amplifying the urgency of her mission. Her mind raced, weaving a delicate tapestry of plans and counterplans, each thread representing a calculated move in the game she must play, even though she didn't know what game she needed to play. Thank you. Timiro stole a furtive glance at her husband's weary face, the lines etched by duty and responsibility accentuating the resolve in his eyes. Mohammed had been her pillar of support, his unwavering strength guiding her through the darkest moments of their journey. She couldn't bear the thought of burdening him further with the situation's complexities, not when the woman she complained about was the captain's wife. Her fingers grazed the coarse fabric of her skirt, the tactile sensation grounding her thoughts in the present. With a subtle shift, she maneuvered herself to face her husband, her eyes meeting his with a depth of determination masked behind a veil of concern. I'll make an effort to mend the relationship with the other woman, she declared, her voice steady. I believe there might have been misunderstanding that have caused this distance. Unity is key, and I'll do my part to ensure it. Mohammed's gaze softened. A fleeting smile tugged at the corners of his lips. I have no doubt you'll be able to smooth things over. With a nod of gratitude, Timiro let her husband's word linger in the air, a comforting balm to the fire blazing within her. Beneath the surface, her mind churned with strategies and counter-strategies. She knew each step must be calculated if she were to assert her place within the intricate social dynamics. Her thoughts raced back to the whispered conversations, the subtle glances, accusations spoken and unspoken that seeped into the fabric of their intentions. The sting of Layla's condescending words fueled the fire of resolve within her, each syllable morphing into a challenge she must conquer. As the night draped its shroud of darkness over her and her husband, Timiro's mind continued to burn, the embers of a plan slowly igniting into a flame of action. The weight of her promise pressed down upon her. She knew no matter what she did, the path ahead was fraught with challenges, but she only knew this was her trouble to solve. By the time they got into bed, the rhythmic cadence of his breathing began to lull her senses. With a silent vow, she let the gentle rhythm of her husband's breathing guide her into a restless slumber. My Mother, The Person and the Patient can be found in Amazon Music, Apple Podcast, or wherever you get your podcasts. Please remember to follow, like, and share, and join me next week as I share with you another episode of my mother's journey as both the person and the patient. Thank you.